Hey guys, welcome back to Module 2. My name is Vikram and I'm so excited you could be joining me today. I'm going to be looking at a very interesting topic called the key to multiplying your time. I've said it before that theology needs to be the foundation of our lives and how we choose to manage and multiply our times well. In fact, theology always leads to practice. What do I mean by that? Well, today we'll discover what it really means to redeem and buy back your time, the lost time that you may feel you've squandered in the past. How can you make the most of your time that you have left on this earth? Well, surprisingly, the answer comes from the Bible. Today, we're going to be looking at a very interesting story revolving around two Bible characters called Elijah and a widow woman who's based in the Old Testament. In fact, if you look in the Bible tells us in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 17, verses 8 and 9. It says, "Then the word of the Lord came to him," meaning Elijah, saying, "Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. See, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you." Now, if you're trying to figure out where Sidon may be, I wouldn't blame you if it's not on your bucket list of places you want to go to as a holiday with your family, because the word Sidon does not exist anymore. In fact, Sidon today is where we would find modern-day Lebanon. And Lebanon, if you may know your geography, bordered with Israel as a nation. So God is basically telling Elijah, saying that, hey, your nation is in the middle of a 3-year-long famine. There's no food in this country. The only way for you to survive is that I've made a way for you to go to Lebanon, and when you arrive in this nation, you will find a widow woman, and I have commanded her that she will provide food for your needs. So Elijah goes with that mindset, goes all the way trekking for several kilometers, hundreds of kilometers, with the expectation that he will meet this woman who will provide for his needs. Well, the story is pretty interesting because if you keep reading in verse 10 to 12, the Bible tells us, "So Elijah arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, indeed a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, 'Please, give me a little water in a cup that I may drink.' And as she was going to get it, he called to her and said, 'Please bring me a morsel of bread in your hands.' So she said, 'As the Lord your God lives, I do not have bread, only a handful of flour in a bin, and a little oil in a jar.'" Now you might be reading that and you might be thinking, flour in a bin? No, thank you. Well, I'm just saying that as a joke. The Bible is saying that it doesn't mean that it was in a literal rubbish bin. It's talking about a container. So it's all good. That bread is kosher to eat. You don't have anything to worry about. But she tells him that, look, I don't have any bread. In fact, whatever I have is just contained in a little container, and I have a little bit of oil in a jar. And then she says, "And see, I'm gathering a couple of sticks that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Ouch. I don't know how he responded to what this widow woman said to Elijah. God gave him instructions that when he arrives in Lebanon, he will meet a widow woman, which he did. And when he speaks to her, she doesn't give him the answer that he was expecting. In fact, she says, "I don't even have enough to survive for myself. You've just come at the right time to see me eat my last meal before I die." I mean, how depressing could this be for Elijah? If it was me, I'd be wondering, have I really heard God's voice right? I made this long journey all the way to Lebanon for what? This woman doesn't even have enough bread or flour to survive herself. How is she going to survive and provide for me? Well, thankfully, Elijah was a prophet of God. He'd experienced God in his life far too many times to doubt the word of God. And so Elijah says to her, "Do not fear. Go and do as you have said, but make me a small cake from it first, and bring it to me, and afterward make some for yourself and for your son." So this is what Elijah says. And he continues on, and he goes on, and he says, "For thus says the Lord God of Israel, the bin of flour shall not be used up, nor shall the jar of oil run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain on the earth." So she went away and did according to the word of Elijah. And he and her household ate for many days. The bin of flour was not used up, nor did the jar of oil run dry. Wow, I don't know if you read the story and if you comprehend what was going on. God performed a miracle in desperate circumstances. But the key is what Elijah says to this widow woman and how it applies to multiplying our time. Elijah tells this woman, I understand you don't have a lot of flour. In fact, I know that this is going to be the last meal that you're going to eat before you think you're going to die. And so Elijah calls her out of her comfort zone. He encourages her to exercise her faith. And he says, when you prepare this meal, give me the first part of it at the beginning. And he says, when you do that, I give you the assurance that you will have abundance to supply for yourself, your household, and including me, until God sends the rains over the nation of Israel and the surrounding nations and ends the famine. What we find in the story is that it's an encouragement for this woman to trust the word of God and to give whatever she had left over into the hands of helping somebody else even before herself. And when she tested God at his word and went by faith, God multiplied the food so that there was joy in the house and there was an abundance of food. We see the effect of multiplication taking place in the story. It's a brilliant story in how it applies to time management and how it affects your life and how you choose to multiply your time. Because the truth is, and the lessons that we can learn from the story, is that are we willing to give whatever time we have left? It may not be flour that God is asking us to give, but remember, time is such a critical resource that we have on this earth. If you're willing to give and consecrate whatever time you have left on this earth and give it into the hands of God, you will find that that is the first step to experiencing time multiplication in your life. And the second lesson that we can learn from this is that if we're willing to do that and give the remaining time in our lives over into the hands of God to be a blessing to somebody else, you will find that God multiplies our time or creates extra time for us to do His will. And throughout, you will experience the greatest of joys. Recently I heard the story of a friend of mine who tragically passed away in a mountain hiking accident. It was a very sad story. Her life was blessing the lives of so many countless people through the ministry that she ran. No one would have expected that at a young age, her ministry was just booming. People were hearing about it. Their life would be lost in such tragic circumstances. But I can tell you, when I look back on her life, she experienced abundance of joy because whatever time that she had left on this earth, it was used for God's purpose and not for her needs. She was constantly putting God first. And I could see that in a funeral service. Everyone was talking about how much they were blessed and enriched by this woman's life and how they were so sad that she would pass away at such a young age. But the comfort that we can have is that because she invested her time on this earth for a higher purpose to bless somebody else, everyone had the full confidence that when Jesus comes again, that she will be there to meet Jesus and all the lost friends who'll be anticipating to see her face to face. It's such beautiful news. The reason why our management of time and the multiplication of time is so vital is because time is the only unrenewable resource that we have left on this earth. Let's face it, when this day comes to an end, you'll never have the chance to repeat this day again. It's not like Microsoft Word. If you make a mistake, you can go Control-Z and edit and repeat everything that you have messed up and start all over again. Time is not like that. Whatever choices you make on this earth for this present day, you can never have a chance to repeat what you have done, whether it's good or whether it is bad. And so I want to encourage you today to really understand and maximize the value of the time that you have left on this earth. In fact, I'm inspired by this quote that comes from an ancient writer who says these words. It says, "The value of time is beyond computation. Christ regarded every moment as precious, and it is thus that we should regard it. Life is too short to be trifled away. We have no time to waste, no time to devote to selfish pleasure. It is now that we are to form characters for the future immortal life." So what is the real purpose of why we want to study? What's the purpose of why we're learning the theology of time multiplication? Where it's very simple. The reason why God has called us to take stock of the time that we have left on this earth is because He desires us to form characters for our future immortal life. That's the reason why God is inviting us to take stock of our time and see this as a critical, useful, valuable resource that could be used as a blessing for somebody else and not just to be lived in selfish pleasure. In fact, if you keep reading, you may be asking, so how do I develop a character that will bless others for my future immortal life? Well, that same chapter continues on and it gives us the words. It says, the only way in which we can redeem our time is by making the most of that which remains, by being co-workers with God in His great plan of redemption. In Him who does this, a transformation of character takes place. He becomes a son of God, a member of the royal family, a child of the heavenly King. Isn't that amazing? To think that true character transformation can only genuinely occur when you and I, like this widow woman and like Elijah in that story, when we see the value of somebody else's life and we prioritize their salvation above anything else. This quote clearly tells us that when we enter into the great plan of redemption for the lost, for the people who are living in depression, for the people who are surrounded by darkness and sorrow and anxiety and have no hope for this life, when we enter into their lives and choose to be a blessing to bless them, we in turn are shaping our own characters. We in turn are shaping our own values so that it becomes more heavenly. It becomes more Christ-like, so that when people meet us, they see Jesus living in us. God always had a higher purpose for why He put us on this earth. He wants us to be a blessing not only for ourselves, but to be a blessing for somebody else. And the truth is that when you influence others for eternity and you invest hope in their lives, it actually has a rebound effect. And I live in Australia, so I know all about boomerangs. You throw it and it will always come back to you. When you choose to live your life unselfishly and invest in somebody else's life for their salvation and for their higher good, it will always return back to you because it will invest hope back into your life. You will experience character transformation in your own life. Character values, like instead of being angry, you will experience gentleness. Instead of being impatient, you will find yourself becoming more and more patient with other people's flaws, with other people's mistakes when they let you down. When you choose to put God first, you will find all the fruits of the Spirit being supercharged and turbocharged in your life in a way like you never experienced before. And let's face it, no one wants to live a miserable life, right? No one wants to live a lonely life. No one wants to live on their own, abandoned and separated from their friends and family members, living a life of regrets, wishing you could turn back time. There's no time for that anymore. The truth is that when you take up the calling that God has for your life to be a blessing for somebody else, you won't experience loneliness, you won't experience depression, you won't experience anxiety because your time is spent on blessing other people, and in return, your life is enriched too. And so the key to unlocking our time and to multiplying time is to see the value that God places in your life to buy back the lost time and to invest it in somebody else. Now, you might be being plagued by doubts, and you might be saying, hey, Vikram, I'm too old right now. I'm just about to retire. I can't turn back all the mistakes I've made in my past life. It's too late for me now. Or you may be thinking, I'm too young. I'm inexperienced. I'm still a high school student. I don't have enough money, no qualifications. I don't have the ability to help anyone. I've got to wait until I get a little bit older before I can be of any good to anybody around me. Well, the question is, how do you know when the right time is? And the prime time is when God can use you to help somebody else. Was it on January 1st in 2015 at midnight? Well, if that was the case, how come no one sent you a reminder? The time is already long past. Maybe you've been wasting your time for too long. The truth is, there will never ever be a perfect time to be involved in being a blessing to somebody else, to unlocking the key to multiplying your time. The truth is that now is the best time to take hold of the time that God has given into your hands and use it to be a blessing to somebody else. You know, it reminds me of the story I heard that took place in 1519. And it revolves around the story of a young Spanish conqueror, explorer, commander, whatever you want to call him. His name is Herman Cortez. And he was coming from Spain to conquer the New World, also known as Mexico. And so when he arrived on the shores of Mexico with his entire team or army or soldiers, whatever it was, when they arrived on the shores of Mexico and he saw those big boats docked at the harbor, this is what Herman Cortez realized. He knew that in this battle to conquer the new land, his soldiers may not have enough food, they may not have enough water, and there's a high chance that they're going to be tempted, maybe even discouraged, to want to jump on those boats and go back to Spain. And so the only way that Herman Cortez could get his gang and get his people to be fully committed was that he gave the order to burn the ships. And you might be thinking, that's pretty radical, but that's what he did. He burnt the ships to the ground so that there was no passageway for his team to return back to Spain until they won the war. From Herman Cortez's perspective, he knew it was a do or die situation. This was their only chance. This was their only opportunity to conquer Mexico. And did they conquer Mexico? You bet they did. With that level of commitment, with that level of loyalty, no one was turning back, literally. They were all in it for the singular cause of conquering that land. And the truth is the same for us today as well. I want to encourage you that today God is inviting you to burn your ships. You may be thinking, I'm too old. I may be not qualified enough. God says, burn the ships. Don't look back anymore. Continue to move forward. You may be thinking, I'm too young. I'm not educated. I don't have the qualifications. I don't have enough money to be of any good to anybody else. God says, burn the ships. Don't look back anymore. Don't look to your doubts. Don't look to your excuses. The truth is that God is inviting us to step forward by faith, just like the widow woman did, believing and trusting that God has a higher plan, a higher purpose, a higher calling for your life. And I believe sincerely that He does, because I've experienced it firsthand in my life. And that's why I wanted to record this workshop, because I knew that God has and He sees great potential in your life, and He wants to maximize the value that you have so that you can reach your life goals and experience abundance of joy and multiply your time so that your life can be a blessing to somebody else. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's workshop, because I know I have. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the third module, where we'll be diving more into some very hyper-practical steps in how you can take charge of your life and multiply your time, not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of people around you. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next module.